Hey, what's up guys? In this video, we're going to cover how do you hire a freelance developer from a client's perspective. So how do you hire a back, front end, or full stack developer? What does full stack mean? What does back, front end mean? And how do you hire this developer from a client's perspective? My name is Jeremy Blong. I've been programming for about a decade now. I'm a full stack JavaScript engineer. So the MERN stack, Mongo, Node, Express, React, React Native. And what we're going to break down in this video is basically the pay, so hourly or milestone. Do you pay through escrow? How do you pay your developer? Communication. Do you hire domestically, so internally in the United States, or do you go international for a discount? And at what cost does that come at? Boundaries. Vetting your developers. So finding a developer that can actually complete the tasks at hand. You don't want to get a developer and get halfway through the project and it gets too complex and they can't finish the project. So vetting your developers' competencies or core competencies is vital. It's essential. Expectations of your developer. How the software development lifecycle works. What is the software development lifecycle? How much software do you need to understand on your own to effectively communicate? Looping back to boundaries and communication and expectations. So where do you find developers? Toptal, Upwork for online. Do you go to meetups to find a local developer? We'll talk about that. And building a relationship, pretty obvious, but we'll break that down a bit further. What can you expect from your developer? What is a relationship like? What's the ideal connection or bond you have with your developer? And mistakes to avoid. So mistakes that I've made as well as my clients have made. And I'll share those with you so that hopefully you can avoid those and learn from my mess ups. So let's get started. We're going to jump in and we're just going to break down this list from top to bottom. Okay, so let's break down pay. So do you pay hourly or by milestones? What are milestones and how should you pay? So a milestone is essentially a chunk of payments, right? It's one big payment broken down into numerous sub-payments. So say you have a milestone of 4 payments total. So we have 4 total payments. You can break that into however you want. So say the total is $4,500. We could do first milestone. Say this is a more labor-intensive milestone, right? So say this includes more hands-on work or more complex work. We'll do $1,500. Maybe the second milestone, you want to do $1,000 because there's less work involved. So we're at $2,500 right here. Maybe the fourth milestone, we do $1,000. We're at $3,500. And then the fifth milestone, $1,000. So that would total up to the $4,500. Milestones are basically paid upon completion. So each one, you get paid upon completion. You don't owe anything. Now, the developer might ask or may ask, they want maybe a deposit or to know the money is actually available. That's this thing called escrow. Escrow is a service where you deposit money. The money is held in a third-party account. And then once both users agree to release the money, then the money is released. Otherwise, if one user disagrees and the other user agrees, then you can dispute the payment and escrow will mitigate the process, ensuring whoever's in the right wins the case, per se. So that's the milestone concept here. And then also hourly. The average hourly dev rate for freelance developers is about $75 to $150 an hour. It might sound like a lot, but if your developer is competent, they can blast through the work, get a lot more done than, say, a junior dev at maybe $30 or $40 an hour. So yes, it's expensive, but you get the expertise and the professionalism and the environment that you're looking for, right? So you want an environment where it's professional, where expectations are realistic, where the developer feels like they're getting compensated, so they put in their best work, their best foot forward, so on and so forth. So it's very important to compensate your developer fairly, but don't overly compensate them. Figure out a fair price, what you're willing to pay yourself. So you yourself need to figure out what am I willing or what can I pay. And then you need to basically essentially find a developer that is within those bounds of whatever you're willing to pay. I would highly suggest finding a high and a low, your lowest of lows and highest of highs. That way you can tell developers, I'm looking within these bounds. Are you within these bounds? And if they are, then you can proceed forward so you don't waste any time. So now we're going to talk about communication and what's entailed in that. So as a client, you do need to know, I'm going to imply or assume that all the baseline communication techniques are at play here. So assuming that you know there's boundaries and there's respect, honesty, transparency, so on and so forth. But what I more mean here with the communication is in the sense of effectively communicating what you need built, right? So knowing a little bit about the technologies, whatever technology you're going to use, you should know enough about it to effectively communicate with your developer about what needs to be done. So, like, I'll give you an example. There are many examples actually, where clients will request something and they don't really know exactly what they have in mind, or maybe they do, but we'll assume they don't know what they have in mind. And then so I end up building them something that they're not proud of, or that wasn't the intended feature or functionality, right? And then so the better scenario is they know what they want, but they can't effectively communicate it. So I recommend like ChatGPT to translate kind of a non-technical, non-developer dialogue into a developer dialogue, right? So use tools like ChatGPT or AI to basically make it simpler and streamline the process. But also you need to know what you want, and then you need to know how to tell your developer how to build that. So another good example, Figma. Figma mockups are supreme. Me as a developer, they help me tremendously because I know exactly what the app should look like, how it should function. I know what my client wants. And then so therefore I can fulfill their desires and their requests and actually build them what they want. So I recommend, so there's a website called Figma. This is like a mock-up design website sort of. So like you would have like a web page, right? And it would allow you to drag and drop things or hire a designer to do this. And then so that way I know exactly what this does, what this does, what this does, and what this does. All right, now we're going to talk about domestic or international hiring. Should you hire locally or should you outsource? Here's a comparison for the domestic versus international, and it's 50 to 150 an hour domestically, 15 to 50 if you outsource. So about a third of the price if you outsource. However, that comes at a cost. So if you see, there's obviously there's some baseline issues that arise, such as communication issues, possibly, depending on where you're hiring from. There's less high-end talent, but you can find quality devs at a cheaper rate. You got to hunt more. So you got to vet these developers, and you got to be able to effectively communicate with these developers in order to transmit your dreams into code, essentially, or their reality, a reality. And also, they have some odd working hours. There is a much, much larger talent pool. So there's a massive pool of users, or developers, I should say, that are available for work, and they're eager for work. But you got to vet those developers much more thoroughly. Here in the US, there's easier potential communication as everyone speaks English. Likely more skilled people because there's an abundance of resources here, like education, schooling, online courses. Like say someone from an impoverished country, maybe they don't have the ability to buy courses, or maybe whatever circumstance, right? Like the U.S. has a plethora of I guess like educational resources at our disposal. We're very lucky. And then other countries may not have that same ability or the time to get good at programming, as they have to focus on life and surviving. So here in the U.S., there are more skilled laborers, easier communication, back to the English, easier to integrate into existing teams. So it's going to be easy to integrate because of the cultural fit, as well as the language, the dialogue, and the fact that you can vet your developer and be sure that this developer is a really good developer. You can still find tons of good developers internationally, developers much better than myself, but you got to look harder. And this is also better for highly complex projects. So it's better for a long-term project whereas internationally it might be more of like a short term for like a website or a mobile, maybe some bug fixes, stuff like that. And then there's a cultural fit or easier cultural integration team-wise, because if you live in the same area, you obviously have the same cultural sort of similarities, hopefully, to make that transition much easier. This is my interpretation of domestic and international. Next, we're going to move on to boundaries and vetting your developer. Let's get started. All right, now we're going to talk about boundaries and vetting your developer. So how do you set boundaries effectively with your developer and vice versa? And also, how do you vet them? So I'm going to talk about boundaries very briefly, and then we'll move on to developer, vetting your developer. Boundaries are critical, right? You don't want to make your developer uncomfortable. The developer doesn't want to make the client uncomfortable. So for instance, one example is like, yes, it's freelancing. Yes, it's, not your stereotypical 9 to 5. However, you do want to basically avoid, you want some sort of working hours. You want to establish some working hours, whatever those may be. It might be flexible, it might be 9 to 3 and then 6 to 9. But whatever those hours are, that's when you generally want to keep the contact with your developer. If you build a better rapport, a more thorough rapport with your developer, then you can kind of extend that a little bit. Like me personally, with my clients, I'm open 9 to 9 basically. So whenever they need me, I'm available, or I try to make myself available. But not every developer is like that. Developers have working times and times where they're not working. They're also human, and they need time off, right? So boundaries, vetting your developer. Vetting your developer is vital. I've stated this numerous times prior or previously already, but making sure your developer can actually fulfill the tasks at hand and complete the assignments when you give them the work you need done is crucial. So what I mean by that is like test your developer or have a developer like another third party come in and test that developer's skills before you actually hire that developer. Maybe have them build like a basic mock-up of something, like an hour-long assignment where they build a mock-up, or use a coding challenge website. Use a website like HackerRank, or I think it's HackerRank, I'm not entirely sure, I don't remember the name, but use an online website with algorithms and code challenges where you can test your developer to see their core competencies. This is a bit overkill, but if I was hiring someone and paying a lot of money to have a developer build my project, I would want to make sure that they could build the project. Also, if you don't want to take that avenue, which is kind of a very aggressive approach, but it's sometimes necessary. If you don't want to take that approach, make sure they have a portfolio in a GitHub. GitHub is where users store their code. So this is where users will upload all of their public repositories, and a repository or a repo, aka, is basically a place to store your code. It's just uploading your code online, essentially. So you want to make sure they have a portfolio, and you want to make sure definitely make sure they have a portfolio, and also check out their GitHub. That can sometimes usually replace the process of you can vet your developer that way instead of actually challenging them with code challenges. But do one or the other to make sure your developer is competent and good enough for the job. A lot of developers, especially me early on, I would inflate my actual abilities to what they actually were. I would over-exaggerate my abilities, essentially. So the more you program, the less you know. The more you know, I guess with saying the more you know, the less you know. So now I know there's so much more I don't know. There's a lot that I do know, but so much more that I don't know. So I don't really overestimate my abilities now. But early on, I did, and I did quite a bit. Next up, we have expectations. We've already covered this essentially, so I'm going to get rid of that one. And then now we're going to talk about the software development lifecycle. What is the software development lifecycle? This is the cycle of the process of the mock-ups. So what I'm going to explain here is basically how you need to sort of approach this, basically. So what you'll need a designer, right? You need mock-ups. You need a tangible, interactive, with Figma, Figma, it's a website. It allows you to have interactive pages, and a lot of users will use Figma. Designers will use Figma. So basically, first, you need a designer. Then you need to create a mock-up of the website with the intended functionality and the design. That's one of the hardest parts, is bringing your vision to life, or coming to terms that you're going to have to accurately convey this to some other person, which is very difficult if someone has a very broad idea, right? If you don't really have the fine details dialed in yet, then it's going to be a little bit difficult to convey that and how you want it to look. I would emphasize putting a lot of trust in your designer and your developer. Give them their creative freedom so that they can create something that is truly a masterpiece. At the end of the day, we are artists. We're just digital artists, especially designers. I'm not great at design, but I'm a more programmatic developer. However, designers are artists, and they should have some flexibility to create your vision in the best light possible. So you'll need a Figma or some sort of mock-up for the user. Whether it's mobile app, you'll need mobile mock-up screens, or a website, you'll need a website. You can also bypass the Figma if there's already a website or numerous websites you want to reference to your developer. So like say you're like, oh, there's this website and this website and this website, and you want me to just merge all those into one. I can do that too. However, I need broad instruction, and that's what I'm saying, I guess. So the software development lifecycle is an iterative process. So basically, you get the design, you implement the code, the client, reviews the code and the changes and the updates, and it's iterative. So it's more like design, changes or code, and then review, and then back to design, code change. It's an iterative process. So it just forever goes in a circle. And basically you're making changes and edits upon each of those revisions. And so you need to know what you want, and you need to know the lingo as well. So the software development lifecycle, there's terminology. Like with the terminology, I basically mean you need to know what a database is. You need to know what React.js is if you're using JavaScript to build a web app. You need to know what a web app is, what a mobile app is. You need to know, what a back or front end is. So say you want me to make edits to the logic, how the database updates. That would be a back end update or logic. So it'd be an API route that updates the logic in the database. So knowing the terminology for the basic stuff, you don't have to know a ton. You don't need a whole lot, but it is important to know the basics. What is the back end? What is front end? What is full stack? These are things you should investigate, or I'll make a video later to inform what full stack versus back versus front end is. But you should investigate this and figure out what those are. And then, so now we have, where do you find developers? Personally, I think the best websites for your cheapest developer at the best, for your best developer at a cheapest rate, Upwork and Toptal. These two websites are phenomenal. Upwork is a race to the bottom. And what I mean by that is the freelancers will compete. They will compete for the lowest bid. So with Upwork, you're going to get a platform where everyone's trying to beat everyone, right? And we'll talk about in-person next, how you can find an in-person developer if you're going domestically. But for international work, Upwork is supreme. It is king. I don't personally like it because they take a lot in fees from the developer. They take an hourly rate. They take a fee to apply to jobs. They take a cash out rate. They take all these different fees and rates. It's kind of scammy. But Toptal is also a website where developers have to apply to work at. So you have a lot more higher end developers at Toptal. Whereas Upwork, anyone can join and anyone can apply. So be wary of that. But it is a competition to the lowest bid, the lowest hourly bid or lowest milestone bid. Mind you, lowest bid does not equate quality, essentially. The lowest bid is not the best bid. There's a reason why they're bidding low, and maybe incompetencies, and maybe the dollar's worth a lot in their country comparatively, or so on and so forth. But the lowest bid, usually not the best bid. What you want to do is find somewhere, so like say we have the lowest bid and the highest. You want to find something kind of like you want to find something, I would say probably in this bracket right here. This bracket right here. You want to find a developer. If you go up here too much, if you go right here, you're not going to get as much quality. If you go right here, you're going to get maximum quality. If you go up here, you're probably overpaying. I would say stay within the 3/4 to half range, so the halfway between the lowest bid and the highest bid, or the 3/4 percentile or whatever, like the 3/4 of the way to the highest bid. And that will ensure that you get a competent dev, but you also get a good rate. And so what I mean by this is that they're competing for the lowest bid, so you're going to have a lot of low bids. Some people will know their worth, or they'll bid appropriately, and maybe they're more experienced, so they're not going to work for that low rate, so they'll apply the highest rate. On Upwork, though, you can submit your high and low for your developer rate, so you can tell developers, hey, this is what I'm willing to pay, and they'll work within those bounds, or they just won't apply. And then also one more thing for where to find developers, local. So local is also a great option. Local, you want to go to go on Meetup, the app, and you can find a bunch of Meetup groups that will then lead you to developers. And so if you want to hire locally, I would just go to a technology meetup. There'll be plenty of developers that are willing to talk to you, see what you need built. Maybe they can help you, maybe they can't. All right, guys and gals, we're almost done. I appreciate you watching my video. If you like this type of content, subscribe. It really helps, or leave a like. I really appreciate it. And we'll wrap this up with mistakes to avoid. So building a relationship, we've pretty much covered that already in quite some depth. So we'll cover the mistakes to avoid. In my personal opinion, the biggest mistakes that I've made were, from a developer's perspective, was bidding too low. So I wasn't necessarily invested in a job because I wasn't getting paid enough. Taking the wrong client, and vice versa. If you're a client taking the wrong developer, it can be a major mess up. So be very calculated and thorough about who you hire and who you trust with this. I would also have people sign NDAs. A NDA is a non-disclosure agreement. A non-disclosure agreement. And the only time you want to use these is basically if you have intellectual property, or IP, shorthand for intellectual property. And you might be asking, what is it, IP? IP is basically an idea that is truly one of a kind, or maybe you don't want other people, your developer, competing in the space. So there's two different types of agreements, right? You have the NDA, which means you can't speak about the project. Your developer can't share intimate details or IP of your concept or your app or your website. They can't share the IP with other people. So this IP and other people, that won't happen. You can sue them. You have legal recourse. Now, the problem with this is not everyone is willing to sign an NDA. NDAs are pretty serious, and they should be taken with, they shouldn't be taken lightly, you know? Because, I mean, I'll sign an NDA, I don't care. A lot of people, they don't want to sign NDAs. So you should only bring this up to someone that you're about to start work with and that you're serious with. And then there's also a thing called a non-compete agreement. And what that means is, say you're in the law space, providing services for through a mobile app, specifically free aid to veterans. what a non-compete will do, this non-compete will prevent me from making a law app that is a mobile app or website that gives free aid to veterans. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. I'm explaining it just to kind of draw it out for you. But it's essentially that. It is a non-compete. So I cannot compete in the same space as you are. I can build other things in the same space, but I can't build the same things as you. And then so if you really want to be serious, if you got a very if you've already dropped a lot of money on a project, or you're expecting to drop a lot of money on a project, NDAs and non-competes can be very helpful. However, you need to know when to use those. It's not always good to use an NDA, and it's not always good to do a non-compete. The only time I'll personally sign a non-compete as a developer is if it's in a space where I know I won't likely have any other clients for a while. And so hopefully that non-compete will expire and by the time I find more work in that space. So I'm not really worried about non-competes as long as it's not a very broad non-compete. However, NDAs, I'll sign those any day. I don't care about NDAs. If you want me to not talk about your IP, I totally get it. I wouldn't want people talking about my IP either. So that's what those are. And mistakes to avoid. Let me wrap this up with a couple more things. So as a client, NDAs, non-competes, very important. And also, you don't want to be overly trusting in the process. You want to question every step along the way. So you want to make sure that you're truly following the path as if you don't know where the path is. You must question everything, and you must be very diligent and thorough with your efforts because software development, the software development lifecycle that we had kind of in this region earlier, that is a complex process, and it's very easy to make mistakes. So just Google things if you have any questions, or ChatGPT them, and just second guess everything is my recommendation. Just don't trust anyone, don't trust anything, second guess everything. Dot your, what is it, dot the T's and I's or whatever. Just do every precaution necessary and try to learn as much as humanly possible. But I do think that if you Google, you will avoid these mistakes. So just Google everything. Seriously, just Google it. Google's your best friend. Thank you for watching this video. I appreciate the view. If you would like to subscribe, it'd be awesome. It would help me out so much. So I hope this helped. I hope you learned something, and stay tuned for more videos. Thanks.